Here we go with targets 1 and 2 homework. So remember, target 1 is just determining, do we have a polynomial or not. So we went over some characteristics in the notes, and if you missed that or need some more explanation, definitely go back to the notes. So with an equation, I'm just going to kind of go through and eliminate different equations here for different reasons. So the first thing is that all of our exponents have to be positive whole numbers. So positive numbers, we're going to get rid of this guy right here because the exponent is negative. We have a fraction exponent over here on f, so that can't be a polynomial. It's got to be positive whole exponents. And on h, remember we talked about if there's a variable in the exponent, we don't know what that exponent is, and there's a possibility it's a negative or a fraction, so we've got to get rid of that. So positive whole exponents. Now there's two things that come from positive whole exponents, and that also means that you can't have any x's in the denominator, the bottom of the fraction. So we're going to get rid of g. The other thing that comes from that is that x's can't be under radicals. So b, we've also got to get rid of. Notice on e, there is a square root, but the x isn't under it, so it's okay. And then the remaining thing that we had to get rid of is anything that has a variable inside absolute value brackets, which we don't have here, so we don't need to worry about that. So the remaining equations are all polynomials. All right, and then moving on to the graphs. So for the graphs, we need to have smooth, continuous curves. So I just mentioned absolute value doesn't work, and that should make sense because it comes to a sharp point right there. So that's why we've got to get rid of that. I don't see anything else with a sharp point, so we're going to leave all of those. But the other characteristic I did say is that it has to be a continuous curve, which A is not, meaning if I were to graph this, I would have to pick up my pencil in order to get to the second half. So continuous means you don't have to pick up your pencil. The remaining 4 graphs are all polynomials. We mentioned in the notes that linear functions are polynomials, as are quadratic, so that should make sense. And then E and F follow all of our rules for polynomials as well. On the back, we're going to do some operations. So we're going to start with addition and subtraction. So on your notes, I suggested that if you have subtraction, you rewrite by distributing that negative. So I'm distributing the negative right now. Oh, that should be a 3. Make sure you write it right if you rewrite it. 3x squared. And then look for terms that are alike. So I always start with the biggest exponent. So the biggest exponent is the third power. And if I combine those, I get 3x to the third. And then we also have some x squared terms. So 3x squared minus 3x squared is actually just 0x squared, which means you don't have to write it at all. So your final answer is 3x squared. Number 2, you have addition, so I don't think you necessarily need to rewrite, so just start by combining your like terms. So we have 2x to the third power, and then you have 3 minus 4, which is negative 1, and we can't combine those anymore, so we stop there. So we have another problem with some subtraction in it. So I'm going to rewrite what we have. So that would be a positive 12p to the fourth minus 8p squared minus 13p to the fifth. Okay, so the biggest exponent looks like is the fifth power p to the fifth. So I have negative 2 minus 5, which would be negative 2 minus 13, which would be negative 15. And then we have the fourth power. So negative 8 plus 12 is 4. And then we have negative 13 and negative 8p squared, which would be negative 21p squared. And that's my final answer. So again, just practicing that distribution when you have a negative. You don't have to do this step, but if you find you're making some mistakes, wouldn't be a bad idea. It doesn't take up a lot of time, and it helps you to make sure you're getting as many problems correct as possible. So third power is where I'm going to start. Oh, they're actually neighbors. Okay, so that would be 2k to the third. And then we have some k terms, so negative 14 minus 12, which would be negative 26. Okay. And then constants, negative 5 minus 10 is negative 15. So now we get into number 5, which actually looks kind of tricky just based on what you have going on here. So I want to show you something that you can do as well that might be helpful whenever you are distributing a negative. If you want to just make it a positive and then distribute that sign throughout, so I'm going to make all those positive, that could be something else you do if you really don't want to rewrite, but it would be the same idea. Okay, so I'm going to start with x to the 4th terms. Just do x to the 4th. Or x to the 4th y squared is actually what I was looking at. So here's an x to the 4th y squared. I'm going to be really careful as I do this. X to the 4th y squared. X to the 4th y squared. Okay, I think I got them all. And then that would be negative 1 plus 12, which is 11, minus 3, which would be 8. X to the 4th y squared. And then I'm going to do the 8x squared y to the 4th. So x squared y to the 4th. So that would be 7x squared y to the 4th. And then I'm going to do y squared. Order doesn't matter here. If you did something else, that's fine. I think I said y squared. I meant y to the 4th. I don't know what I said actually. And then 13y. So that was kind of tricky to keep everything in order, but again, looking for those like terms. And I'll show you on number 6 again how you can do that distribution without rewriting. So what you would have to do is change this to a positive, this to a negative, positive, negative, positive, positive, positive. So hopefully you can kind of see how that works without rewriting. So again, we've got some tricky terms here. I'm going to start with x to the 4th. So here's an x to the 4th. Here's an x to the 4th. So that would be 3x to the 4th. And now I'm going to do x to the 3rd y squared. So I have negative 6 plus 12, which is 6, x to the 3rd y squared. Then I think everything left is just an x. So we have 12 minus 7, which is 5, plus 11, which is 16x. Okay, and so now we get into some multiplication. So a couple different ways that you can do multiplication. So if it's a binomial times a binomial, which is what we have here on 7, you can do FOIL. So you can think about doing your first terms, which would be 20n squared. And then your outer terms, that's so FOIL, so I'm on the O, negative 4n, inner, negative 10n, and last to be a positive 2. And then when you combine your like terms, there in the middle, you have to get 20n squared minus 14n plus 2, which is your final answer. So you can use this strategy again on number 8, but I just want to show you kind of looking at it a different way. So what you can do is first distribute the 2x to these numbers. So that would be a 10x squared and a 6x. And then you can distribute the negative 5 to these numbers. So a negative 25x minus 15. It's actually the same exact thing as FOIL. It's just thinking about it a different way, kind of structuring it in your head a different way. So now I'm just combining like terms, so that would be negative 19x. And so the second way I showed you is really how I do it whenever it's not a 2 by 2. So I just wanted to show you how that works instead of FOIL. Okay, so on 9, 10, or 9, 10, 11, and 12, you have a 3 times 3, so a trinomial times a trinomial. Lots of ways you can set this up. One way I like to set it up, and I'll show you a couple different ways, is I rewrite this. So starting with a 4m squared, you're going to multiply that times all of that. And then you're going to take your middle term times all of this. And then your last term times all of this. Okay, and then we're going to actually perform that multiplication. So this would start us off with a negative 20 m to the 4th plus 16 m to the 3rd plus 16 m squared. And then the second multiplication, I'm going to stack this up like I showed you on your notes. So I'm going to start with a 35 m to the 3rd, stacking it under the previous m to the 3rd, minus 28 m squared minus 28m. And now for the blue. So that would be 10m squared minus 8m minus 8. And now I'm going to add all of this up to get my final answer. So my final answer here at the bottom would be negative 20m to the 4th. If I add that up, that would be 51m to the 3rd. Then this would be negative 2m squared. This would be negative 36m minus 8. And that would be my final answer there at the bottom. Now I said I was going to show you a different way to do this. So again, if rewriting is really not your jam, there is another way to do this. So take your first number and you're going to multiply it by all of this. So really I'm just kind of going to this second step from that problem. So that would start us off with a 15x to the 4th minus 12x to the 3rd plus 21x squared. So I'm doing the same thing, I just didn't do that rewriting step. So now negative 8 times all of this, so that would be 40x to the 3rd, and then that would be negative 32x squared plus 56x. And then we're going to distribute a negative 2 to all of this. So negative 10x squared minus 8x plus 14. But notice I still am doing that stacking technique. I really find that to be helpful. But again, you can ditch it. So combining like terms as we go down, 15x to the 4th. This would be 28x to the 3rd. Then we have, that would be 11, so that would be negative 21x squared. And we have 48x plus 14. So I'm going to show you that again here on 11, so without having to rewrite. I'm going to distribute a negative 6n to start off with, so that would be a negative 36n to the fourth minus 24n to the third plus 36n squared. Then I have a negative n I'm going to distribute, so it's going to start with a negative 6n to the third minus 4n squared plus 6n. And then I'm going to distribute this negative 1. So again, to all of that. So starting with negative 6n squared minus 4n plus 6. And let's tally it up. So that's negative 36n to the fourth. That would be minus 30n to the third plus 26n squared plus 2n plus 6. All right, last one. We're having so much fun. Distribute your negative 8. So that would be negative 64a squared minus, oh, 8 to the fourth, come on. Minus 56a to the third plus 32a squared. Now we have an a that we're going to distribute, so that would be 8a cubed plus 7a squared minus 4a. And now we have a negative 1 to distribute, so that would be negative 8a squared minus 7a plus 4. And tallying that up, we get negative 64a to the fourth. Then that's negative 48a to the third, 31a squared minus 11a plus 4. And that's your homework over targets 1 and 2.